box. It's Tales TV.
We just popped in to say hello. We just popped in to hear the show, the show, the show. You'll hear the show and then you'll go. There's more to know, so take it slow. The show, the show, the show.
The shed says, "You are welcome."
A place full of tales.
Made by your imagination.
There's things to be told.
Things to be sung.
Some that are old.
And things that are young.
From the tips of our toes
To the top of your head. Together we are.
Tales from the shed. Together we are.
Tales from the shed.
Tales from the shed.
Tales from the shed.
Take it away, guys. Shum. Hello, everybody. My name's Red Blurgh, and welcome to this episode of Tales TV. Today we're going to be looking at things that make up all of the world. They are all shapes and sizes, like all of us. My favourite shape is a circle. I also like squares. But you guys, you are all stars. So let's get the show on. Let's finish with some show. Let's see a new character. See Wiz Wally. Thinks he's magic. Thinks he's magic. So, let's have a look into this episode of Tales TV. All shapes and sizes special. You're special as well.
Ready? 10 tens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10.
Bleno, it's me, Pink Bear. And I'm here with my friend Saul. And we have 10 fruit and veg. Are you ready? Number 1, tomato. Lovely. Number 2, orange. Delicious. Number 3, an onion. Oh. Number 4, an apple. Oops. Number 5, a lemon. Number 6, a banana. Number 7, a zucchini. Number 8, grapes. Number 9, a potato. And number 10, it's lettuce, my favourite. Lovely, we're all full up.
Okay.
But he has to stay at home.
Is it on? Oh, hello, my little friends. My name is the Grand Wiz Wally. Magic from the top of my magic hat, to the bottom of my long white magic beard. I'm here to be your teacher. No, really, I am. I'm now going to tell you the best story ever in the world. Sit yourselves down. Get ready. Ah, ooh, doopy doopy doo. That's the intro music. Here's the best story in the world ever, told to you, the amazing children. Ready? Once upon a time. The end. Thank you, clap. Yeah, thank you so much. What? Don't you think it was the best story you ever heard? No? Maybe the second best? What? The worst? Oh dear. I am sorry. Well, maybe I need your stories. So maybe you can send me some things that can come in between Once Upon a Time and the end. Maybe we can make up our own story. What do you think? And we can put it here on the screen next to me. Have a go, my little chums. Because your stories are tomorrow's stories. And that's true. So, enough storytelling. Let's get dancing.
All shapes and sizes, circle, star and square. Shapes are full of surprises. This fits here but won't go there. The square is square but it's not fair to say that it's a four. It's great for meals but not for wheels cause corners has it four. The star is bright and shines at night in the corner of the sky. 5 points it makes before day breaks a twinkle in your eye. The circle's round and often found in the middle of a hole. Its bouncy ball is chased by orcas down a hill. It will roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. Roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. All shapes and sizes, circle, star and square. Shapes are full of surprises. This fits here but won't go there. All shapes and sizes, circle, star and square. Shapes are full of surprises. This fits here but won't go there.
Tales made a home beam straight to your screen. It's our new idea called Tales TV. Tales through the night and tales through the day. Tales online and here to stay. Tales don't pause, they only play. Tales for your heart and tales for your dreams. Let's all get together and
Blah 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 blah.
together and
Blah 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 blah.
together and
Blah 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 blah.
watch Tales TV.